William, King Charles, Queen Camilla, Kate, 4 working royals, 1 packed calendar, and, across 2025 and 2026, a fairly clear pattern of a family choosing to show up, for each other and for the public, in ways that go beyond the usual ceremonial photographs. Start with Charles, because his health journey has quietly reshaped how this entire family operates. Since his cancer diagnosis was first disclosed in February 2024, Charles has managed his treatment in public with a consistency that's become its own kind of statement. By December 2025, he'd shared cautiously encouraging news that his treatment could potentially be reduced if he continued responding well. He hasn't given a full formal update since, but by the summer of 2026 he was visibly back in motion, keeping a schedule that would challenge a monarch half his age. That resilience showed up in small, human moments rather than grand statements. At the inaugural RHS Sandringham Flower Show on July 22, 2026, the first time the Royal Horticultural Society staged its own show at a royal residence, Charles arrived by horse-drawn carriage, greeted the public, and presented awards just as he always had. When a member of the crowd told him, "I'm the same age as you are looking good," Charles replied without missing a beat, "It gets much harder, doesn't it?" It's part of a running pattern since his diagnosis, joking that his skiing days are behind him, telling hospital visitors that the bits don't work so well when you get past 70. Humor, more than any official statement, has become one of his most consistent ways of processing his own illness in public. Camilla has remained a steady presence throughout, marking her own milestones with a similar mix of ceremony and quiet privacy. She turned 79 on July 17, 2026, and Buckingham Palace marked the occasion with 2 official portraits taken by royal photographer Chris Jackson at Hillsborough Castle in Northern Ireland. In the photos, she wore a diamond and sapphire butterfly brooch, one originally presented to the late Queen Elizabeth at the Birmingham Spring Fair back in February 1977, a small, deliberate link between the 2 women who've worn the consort's role a generation apart. William and Kate marked the day publicly too, with a simple social media post reading, "Happy birthday to Her Majesty," complete with a cake emoji. True to form, Camilla spent her actual birthday privately at Highgrove, away from the cameras entirely. Her public duties that summer extended well beyond her own birthday. She joined Charles for the Order of the Garter service at St. George's Chapel, Windsor on June 15th. Britain's oldest and most senior order of chivalry, founded in 1348, dressed in the order's dark green velvet robes alongside William, Princess Anne, and the Duke of Edinburgh. Days later, she was back in traditional dress entirely, joining Charles for the formal opening of the 7th session of the Scottish Parliament on June 27th, both of them arriving not in the usual formal wear but in traditional tartan kilts. Camilla in vibrant red with a khaki green jacket. Then, on July 1st, came the Order of the Thistle service at St. Giles Cathedral in Edinburgh, Scotland's highest honor, where Camilla, installed into the order back in 2024, took her place in the procession alongside Charles, William, and Prince Edward. If Charles's story this stretch has been about managing illness with humor, Kate's has been about turning her own recovery into something she actively gives back. Her cancer journey began publicly in March 2024, when she released a video statement revealing that a preventative course of chemotherapy had followed what doctors initially believed was a non-cancerous procedure. By September 2024, she described herself as cancer-free. By January 2025, she announced she was in remission, calling it a relief, and took on a new role as joint patron of the Royal Marsden, the London hospital where she'd been treated. That patronage became active, not symbolic. On June 29, 2026, Kensington Palace confirmed that Kate had quietly completed the National Three Peaks Challenge, climbing the highest mountains in England, Scotland, and Wales in just 24 hours, covering 23 miles, largely on her own, with no advance announcement and no cameras following her up the trails. The palace only revealed the achievement after she'd already finished. In a personal caption, she explained she'd taken on the challenge not simply as a physical endeavor, but as a chance to explore life beyond diagnosis and to give something back, adding in an accompanying video that she felt so grateful to be here, to be strong enough to walk these hills. Weeks earlier, in June 2026, she'd shown a different, more vulnerable side of that same recovery during a visit to the Christie Cancer Center in Manchester. In an art therapy room, she told patients that during her own treatment, she hadn't been able to read or really focus on anything, turning instead to coloring, not for any finished product, but simply as a way to exist inside something that asked nothing of her. It was one of the more specific, unscripted details she's shared since her diagnosis, and it stood in quiet contrast to the physical triumph of the mountain climb just days later. Proof that recovery, even a genuinely successful one, doesn't erase the harder parts of what came before it. Threaded through all of this individual news was a summer of shared ceremonial duty that rarely gave any of the four a break. It began June 9th, when Charles led a Royal Marine ceremony at Windsor. 4 days later came Trooping the Colour, marking Charles's official birthday for the fourth time since becoming king, this time traveling to Horse Guards Parade in the Ascot Landau carriage rather than on horseback, seated beside Camilla, a shift that's followed his cancer diagnosis. William and Kate arrived with George, Charlotte, and Louis, and royal watchers noticed a small detail. Louis got the coveted seat beside his mother in the carriage, a spot that had belonged to Charlotte the year before. 2 days after that came the Order of the Garter, where Kate watched from the Galilee porch in a pale yellow coat dress by Patrick McDowell, made from bespoke English silk. Then the Scottish ceremonies in late June and early July. In between all of it, William made his own mark on the calendar in a very different register, becoming the first royal to ever chair a panel at London Tech Week on June 10th, launching the UK's first homelessness data lab alongside Salesforce, Bloomberg, and more than 25 other organizations, arguing plainly that the earlier you deal with a problem, the better. While his parents managed health and ceremony, William spent 2025 and 2026 building out several of his own long-running projects. In June 2026, his newly released Integrated Impact Report revealed plans to sell off roughly 20% of the Duchy of Cornwall's billion-pound property portfolio over the next decade, redirecting around £500 million toward housing, renewable energy, and environmental restoration, including 2,500 new homes, 900 of them affordable. The same report marked his first ever voluntary disclosure of his tax bill, £7.76 million for the 2025-26 year, a figure he's under no legal obligation to make public at all. His environmental work extended well beyond his own estate. In February 2026, he announced Mumbai would host the 6th Earthshot Prize ceremony later that year, a personal choice as much as a strategic one, since he and Kate had visited the city together back in 2016 ahead of their 5th wedding anniversary. And during his 44th birthday weekend that June, which landed on Father's Day, he kept things low-key with family before returning to work the very next Monday, hosting the United for Wildlife Business Forum alongside Emma Watson and Benedict Cumberbatch, securing commitments from Amazon, Google, PayPal, and dozens of other major companies to fight a wildlife trafficking industry worth up to $23 billion a year. "The planet does not have time for inch-by-inch change," he told the crowd. None of this happened in isolation from the rest of the family either. Princess Anne, at 75, has continued serving as the family's most reliably active member, attending Royal Ascot in July, touring the Emirates Great Britain Sail Grand Prix team's technology in Southampton, and visiting the Commonwealth Games headquarters in Glasgow on July 30th, where the Games' official Instagram account called it a pleasure to welcome HRH the Princess Royal to Glasgow 2026 HQ. She's held the title of the family's hardest-working royal by engagement count for years running, a record that's remained steady even through past health scares of her own. Elsewhere, quieter family milestones unfolded alongside the bigger headlines. Anne's son, Peter Phillips, Queen Elizabeth's eldest grandchild, married Harriet Sperling, an NHS pediatric nurse, in a small private ceremony at All Saints Church in Kemble, Cirencester, that same summer, with an engagement ring from Pragnell, the same jeweler that made Queen Elizabeth's own engagement ring back in 1946. And on July 2, 2026, Lady Louise Windsor, Prince Edward and Sophie's daughter, graduated from the University of St. Andrews with a degree in English, continuing a family tradition of choosing understated milestones over public spectacle. She and her brother James have never used their HRH titles, a deliberate choice their parents made early on. Taken together, these smaller stories reinforce the same pattern visible at the center of the family. Milestones marked with real substance rather than pure ceremony, and a general instinct toward privacy even when the public eye is watching closely. Perhaps the most consistent thread across all four of them, though, isn't any single project. It's a shared, growing willingness to talk about hard things plainly rather than manage them silently. In October 2025, during his appearance on Apple TV Guz, The Reluctant Traveler, William described his approach to raising George, Charlotte, and Louise through Kate's illness. "We're a very open family, so we talk about things that bother and trouble us, but you never quite know the knock-on effects it can have." In February 2026, on a BBC Radio 1 mental health special, he admitted plainly, "You feel a sense that you need to fix it for everyone, and that I find quite difficult." Kate has matched that candor in her own way, describing her cancer journey as complex, scary, and unpredictable, and telling patients at the Christie about the parts of chemotherapy that rarely make it into official statements, like losing the ability to concentrate. Even Charles's approach to his own illness, built around dry humor rather than solemnity, fits the same broader shift. Less performance, more plain honesty, even from an institution historically built on the opposite instinct. None of this amounts to a single dramatic headline. There's no scandal at the center of any of it, no succession crisis, no family rift driving the story. What 2025 and 2026 actually show, when you line up the verified record, is four people managing an unusually difficult stretch, two significant cancer diagnoses within months of each other, a shrinking pool of working royals, and a public more scrutinizing than ever, largely by doing the ordinary, unglamorous work in front of them. Charles joking his way through treatment while keeping a packed calendar, Camilla holding down a demanding ceremonial schedule while protecting her own quiet privacy, Kate turning 2 years of illness into genuine advocacy and one very literal mountain climbed, and William quietly restructuring the institutional and financial groundwork he'll eventually inherit, one verified decision at a time. If there's a single through line connecting all four, it might be this: a family that spent the last 2 years choosing, again and again, to be seen as they actually are, tired, scared, joking, climbing, showing up, rather than as the polished version tradition once demanded of them. That shift hasn't erased the institution's formality. The velvet robes, the state ceremonies, and the centuries-old titles are all still very much intact. But underneath the ceremony, something genuinely different has taken hold. A willingness, verified in interview after interview and statement after statement, to let the public see the actual cost of what they're carrying. A diagnosis, a grief, a difficult conversation with a child, rather than presenting only the finished, composed version once the hard part was already over. Thanks for watching. Subscribe for more royal updates.